some of the things that white Native American Protestants, so white Protestant males, were saying about why they were the better Americans and why they were the only people who could ever be good Americans, is because they believed that they were imbued with independence, self-reliance, freedom, discipline, a sense of duty, intelligence, and empathy. And on the other side, they claim that immigrants could never be that because they were not Protestants for one thing, but for the other, because they weren't here in the beginning. And because they weren't here in the beginning, which of course is not true, these people are retelling the origin of America so that it only includes them. Much like contemporary discussions about immigration do the exact same thing. They blot out all of the minorities in the past in order to say, well, the original people were white people. But there were 4 million Africans living in America in 1860. There were millions of Native Americans living in America in the 1860s. There were millions of people who did not come from Nordic countries who lived in America. America, from its very beginning, has been a diverse state. The problem is that white Protestant males ensured that they were in charge of the politics, and immigration threatened that. It threatened the control they had, not because they were better than everybody else, but because they were the first here, and therefore they created a system that protected their rights, their power, their control of economics. Worry that immigrants are going to work for less money, that they will, because they come from places that are poorer, that have less infrastructure, less care for workers, that these workers, in order to survive, will undercut Native, small n Native Americans, white Protestant men who are already living here. And therefore, they're going to have to compete with immigrants, and they probably are going to make less money, or their jobs are at risk. These are all things we can hear in contemporary discussions about immigration. They also claim that immigrants aren't smart, and that they are mimics. They're going to steal white people's names, and then they're going to take white people's women. So here we see the ways in which gender is played into it as well, male control of women. And the concern is that if immigrants come and their swarthiness or masculinity or whatever it is appeals to white women, white men will then be in competition for white women. Isn't there a contradiction at play here? Because on the one hand, white Protestant men are saying they're the smartest, they're the most self-reliant, they're the most independent, they're the most free. If that was the case, why would they be afraid of immigrants? Because couldn't they just compete head to head? If they're, by their own logic, shouldn't they be able to defeat immigrants and put immigrants in their place if they were so great? People will use these reasons across time because they feel fear. They feel honest fear. And so we see this move in this period after the war, where after World War I, where white Americans, especially white men, feel threatened. They feel threatened by immigration. They feel threatened by African American migration to the north. They feel threatened by women receiving the right to vote. They feel threatened by minorities receiving jobs and moving into their neighborhoods. All of these things make these people who are becoming part of this 100% Americanism, which begins to blossom in the late teens and early 1920s, this becomes huge. This is why the KKK spreads into the North. It is not a regional. It's not a regional group anymore. It's no longer the South. In fact, some of the largest memberships in the KKK are in cities like Detroit and Chicago, where African Americans have moved. And so the 1920s is a weird space where conservative politics takes over from progressivism. And for a decade, conservatism is sort of what happens. And conservatives step in and they protect industry. And this leads to consolidation of corporations, and it leads to the rise of chain supermarkets, branded products, canned products especially, and these essentially large corporations take out mom and pop operations. Also, the 1920s is a time of relief, and people want to party. People want to relax. They've had an existential experience with World War I, and they want to relax. And the 20s become a period of exuberance, of happiness and relaxation that become a pause point in America. So you have things like movies and radios and cars, and these things knit the country together culturally. So instead of having these culturally isolated cities around America with different stars, different celebrities, musical acts, musical styles, movies and radios link the country together and begin to create a kind of universalized culture. And that universalized culture and that knitting together of people will begin to change the way that people think about politics and the world. And the next president, the president in the 1930s, Roosevelt, he will use those mechanisms, mass transportation, mass communication, to convince the country that a government that helps people would be more valuable than a government that helps corporations. If you have any questions, come to office hours or email me. All right. Have a good week.